Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Gnaneshwer Reddy from Accountable Hindustan. Today I'm thrilled to have Dr. Kevin, a global biotech innovator who has worked in India, Italy, USA, and Denmark. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. You have a fascinating journey, bachelor's and master's in India, PhD in Italy, postdoc in Harvard Medical School, a startup experience in the Denmark, an MBA in Paris. Could you give a quick snapshot of your journey so far?
I started in Bangalore. I studied my bachelor's and master's in microbiology. At that time, I was pretty young, so I didn't really know what direction to take. But I got an internship at Medical College Research Institute, which I took. And from there, the journey started actually. The internship was in infectious diseases. And then I started working on some of the infectious diseases projects funded by the Gates Foundation back in Bangalore. After my internship, I started as a lab supervisor, which was very short. Then they promoted me to a technical manager for Indo-Canadian HIV/AIDS projects and other Gates Foundation projects, which really got me going. I got to see the ground reality. People are suffering and what initiatives were needed. That project, especially the Gates Foundation funded project of phase 3 clinical trial, ended early because it was FDA approved and the halfway through the data wasn't that encouraging. It wasn't working as we thought. During that time, my natural thought was, since I was in research, let me apply for a PhD. I tried a few places. Finally, there was a European Commission funded project called Europrise, the
Yeah,
consortia of more than 100 groups across Europe. At that time, UK was part of the European Union, and there were states
yeah,
from UK also participating. So I just contacted some people in that consortia because they were giving out some PhD fellowships, and we put in a proposal together along with the professor who said, "Okay, let me support my application from university." Who was a part of this consortium? I ended up getting the fellowship from the European Commission, so I moved to Siena, Italy. Started my PhD, I finished it, and then was there as a postdoc. In the meantime, I got
yeah,
another postdoctoral fellowship at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. I moved to
yeah,
Boston. After that, it's time for me to do something by myself. I was like, I didn't
yeah.
know the challenges of being an entrepreneur and starting a own company and getting into the business world, which was a little naive of me. But without any entrepreneurial or business background, I said, let me go back
Yeah.
home. I ended up coming back to Bangalore, starting my company there. Initially, it was gaining some traction. Got in Karnataka, there's something called ITBT department's initiative, where they choose startups from IT and BT sector, and they really help them with mentorship. They promised funding, which never came. Applied for the biotechnology ignition grant from the central government. Every time we went to the last round, ended up getting no funding. Decided, okay, this is
I think I'm also struggling with that.
I know it's not easy, especially when you're outside the Indian ecosystem for over 10 years. So when you are outside or coming back without a strong network, it's very difficult.
You're
If you're
going
not really
into
part of a group or don't have a mentor, you're not going anywhere. I got frustrated after some time. And I was looking at other startup ecosystems where I came across this startup Denmark. It was quite clear. Let's say you put in a proposal. If it fits their criteria, they'll give a score. If your score is above so much, you get a letter saying the startup has been approved and you can set up.
I think we can go a little bit later on each of
Yeah,
these topics in detail. You did your bachelor's and master's degree
yeah.
in India. What were your biggest challenges during the master's and bachelor's in India?
Let's say education system was pretty good.
Mm,
Bachelor's, of course, affiliated to Bangalore University. I
mm,
did it in St. Joseph's, which is quite
mm,
recognized in Bangalore at least. So, I started my bachelor's. I think it was MCB, uh, microbiology, chemistry, and
mm,
botany, which went as planned. And then I continued. I did my master's also in St. Joseph's itself in microbiology. So that was
mm.
fine because I had a long history with them because I started my school there, I did my bachelor's there, I did my master's there, so they had my entire file. So I didn't really face any challenges when it comes to education. But after I finished my master's, the challenges
Yeah,
started.
exactly.
I remember going to Sipla in Goa and giving interviews, even though
Mm,
it has biotech companies. I remember going to Biocon. It's really tough, especially in Bangalore. Its education hub is so high that it gets very difficult to find a job. Luckily for me, through some contacts, I St. John's Research Institute affiliated to St. John's Medical School. They said that we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
offer you nothing, but if you want to learn something, get some experience, we can take you as an
After master's degree,
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
talking
After my
about.
master's degree, I mean, they're like, but yeah, that was a stepping stone. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
would have probably
Mm.
ended up with getting a job with some politics role and some stuff like that, and ended
Yeah.
up doing nothing. Once you get that, my classmates who joined QC departments, "Oh, what are you going to do after that? Become QC manager."
Yeah, exactly.
So
So my question was, when you have the master's degree and that internship is not basically based on your talent, you're looking for some networks, and it's because your talent is not working, like the Indian system is not allowing you to go through that system.
yeah, in other countries, after you finish your masters for internship, there's a clear path. The
Exactly.
universities are linked with certain companies. They're linked with certain areas where they say, okay, this the merit-based internship here and stuff like that.
I teach until the intermediate level, and I see schools provide apprenticeships for the early stages. A student has to go through those apprenticeships for gaining the experience in the beginning, at least to understand whether they like the job in the future or not. Is making sure that they gain some understanding in the bachelor's. They will have to go through the rigorous
Mhm.
internship every semester to do some at least 6 weeks or 8 weeks internships, that is paid internships. In masters also they have to go through the again paid internship. So during this bachelor's and masters you will have enough experience to land a
Yeah.
job. We don't have system. We look for finishing bachelor's, masters, unskilled people like you, still struggling to find and go through the legal system rather than illegal system. Of course, networking works everywhere, but it's in the good way of networking, not the bad way of networking.
That's, I guess, one of the downsides of the Indian education system where they don't prioritize actual work experience during courses. And some
Exactly.
now it's getting better. At the master's level, people send you for internships. It's gaining momentum. When I finished my master's in 2004, it was a different scenario. Cell phones had just started. There was no internet, so it was really strange. Finding internship also was a huge challenge because
Yeah.
none of these companies had websites, and I mean, we didn't even have proper internet access. It was really new. That kind of era, you had to go with the CV in hand, places to places. Connections were really important at that time. It's not like this era where
Mhm.
you type something, get a company's website, send your CV, and ask for interest. It was a different era altogether.
Yeah, I understand. So after all this struggle, could you share any key influencers in your life to get into the PhD in Italy? Why did you decided to move to Italy for your PhD rather than staying in India or going to somewhere else like UK or USA?
Let's say once I started working at St. John's as a intern, then moved up working on international projects. My focus, as usual, would be the US.
Mm.
And I contacted a few people in my network because I was working with the Gates Foundation and some universities in Canada. Many of the people who were working on this project were from University of Washington. I contacted them to see where I can get and where I can go through. Of course, I asked the people who were working at our institute as well if I can pursue a PhD somewhere. And that time, PhD in infectious diseases was not that easy, being from MSc microbiology back. And finally, it was like, okay, I took it upon myself. I'd contacted enough people and they were trying to help me get a position as well. I myself reach out to people who were I wanted to pursue my PhD in. You get a
Mm.
few hits, a few misses, and this professor was kind enough to say, okay, let's see, there's this consortium, as you know, who's giving out a PhD fellowship funded by the European Commission. Let's put in a proposal. If you get the fellowship, you'll have your
Mm.
stipend and funding to support your PhD work. You can come and work
Yeah.
here. It was nice because it was part of the European program. I had a co-supervisor from a different university in London, so it worked out pretty well. We applied all together, sent the application, and it got approved in the first round. I think first round only 10 people got the fellowship from all over the world.
So which is for only 10
In the
people.
first round, they gave it to 10 people, and I think in the second round, the second year, they gave out about 20 PhD fellowship.
Did you know in the beginning you are supposed to be coming to Delhi?
And yes, of course, I knew I would be based in Siena.
When I was in masters, you finish your
Yeah, yeah.
PhD applying for Harvard Medical School probably the same time.
After I finished my PhD, I knew there were programs I was already involved in. One European Commission project had some work through the application process and interviews. Before I finished my PhD itself, I knew that I'd get a contract as a postdoc because I'd finished the whole process and my application
Mm.
was approved. I finished in the team and immediately started my postdoctoral contract.
My next question is when you first arrived in Italy, what was your biggest cultural shock? Did you have to learn Italian right away?
When I was working in St. John's, we were collaborating with the institute in Belgium. So we had a lot of people coming over from Belgium to a lab, setting up standards. I went to Belgium for training new people. There were a lot of other projects who had us from all over the world. I mean, parts from Europe, and so
Mm.
the environment there was very international. That's when I got to know a lot of people, people from UK and
Mm.
everywhere coming there, doing some field work, doing some lab. I understood the culture and how they work. Belgium for training. I knew language would be a barrier. Luckily, my supervisor also the director spoke perfect English. But the students were a problem. When you get into the lab, you realize that even PhD students, even though they read the research articles, they have to publish in English. The spoken English is
Yeah.
not really that great. So yeah, I mean, getting used to that was a little bit of initially was a little bit of a problem, and yeah, of course, culturally, it's very different. Open, very
Yeah.
open culturally. There's a very vibrant culture, especially a place like Siena, which has a lot of history and stuff like that. But yeah, until
Amazing.
you learn the language, you feel like outsider because you cannot really make friends. But I managed, since I was a PhD student in
I mean,
the lab was pretty big. I met these people every day. Slowly started integrating. It took me about a year to understand most of it.
yeah.
After a year and a half, I started speaking. Then it was a different story. I got used to the culture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was struggling a lot. You were speaking in Italian and making friends and stuff. I think I had that cultural shock because from the small town in India coming to Italy, I also missed my flight. I was in Belgium. I missed my flight, and
yes.
they had to give me different
Yeah,
ticket.
I was lucky, I guess. It was really nice because I landed in Florence. I didn't speak any
Mm.
Italian at that point. On the flight, I learned a few words. I was really worried initially, but my professor was nice enough to come to the airport to pick me up. Florence is about 65 kilometers from Siena. My professor drove from Siena, came to the airport and picked me up, brought me to Siena, and
Mm.
introduced me to all the lab members and took me to where I was staying. One of the residences I had a place already set up. He took me there
Mm.
and
Mm.
showed me around, which was like really nice of him. I got really
Amazing.
lucky.
Yeah. Italians are nice people. Always willing to teach you Italian because they want the communication. They
Yeah.
want to keep their hands
Yeah.
more.
I mean, if you don't
You
understand
know.
the language, you look at the hands, you understand half of it.
I stayed 8 years in Italy. After masters, I did PhD from University of Verona. So the next question is around comparing the two education system. How did you find the major differences in infrastructure or mentorship style? Any
Oh,
difference in research funding or lab?
funding wise, let's not go there. Italy is a part of the European Union, and European Union, when it comes
Yeah.
to funding, yeah, after NIH, I think the European Union has the most robust funding infrastructure, and it's been very successful. So let's not compare. It's a different world. India is still a developing economy. 20 years ago, it was still
Mm.
when I moved for my PhD, it was worse. Now, I mean, to be honest, looking at the new budget, actually reserved good amount of funding for research. They're moving towards that, but that's not. It's not fair. I mean, it's completely not
There's
fair. Yeah,
still there's disparity between
absolutely, absolutely.
Indian
ICMR, for
research
example,
and
ICMR gives out certain. I remember going back from Boston and looking at the ICMR website. They're like, no, we have stopped funding anything. There's no funding. What the hell is happening?
We discussed PhD experiences and just wanted your view to the listeners who are thinking or following a similar path of yours, like doing PhD in Europe. What do you think the best suggestion or any pitfalls to avoid?
I guess it really depends. If you want to put in the effort,
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
don't finish it like that. You hope that you finish it within 4 years, but then it really depends on how much data you have. You go to the panel and they say you need more data, everything. So you devote a considerable time in finishing a PhD. So one suggestion I would give is people make the mistake of choosing a lab rather than a PI. Focus more on choosing the right
Mm,
mentor than the lab. That's always a lot of difference. There are labs which are successful but very mechanical. You get your PhD, your publications, but you become one of those mechanic people who really don't invest a lot of time in thinking and coming up with something innovative rather than you start thinking more about I need this data to publish. That's all. Publication will become your main priority, which for me is a wrong thing to do. It's always publish or perish. It's become a common saying in the academic world. But what that has done is people are just looking at how can I publish? How can I publish? Stop
yeah.
exploring. And especially during your PhD, I think you need to have a proper mentor who would really help you to explore and learn your basics. Then you can think about publication. But now, if you join a big lab, there's always follow this protocol to get publication. So your thinking doesn't develop. Look for a mentor who gives you
Mm.
freedom to explore and where also helps you develop as a researcher. So that is one thing I would really recommend people doing instead of looking at labs, speak to the mentors and choose the right mentor.
How does doing a PhD in Italy compare?
I did my PhD in Italy. Some mentors let you explore more, some are like stick to the plan. In India, I don't know how it works, but I've heard stories.
Yeah, I know like couple of girls during my PhD. They contacted me for postdoc positions, and they used to share a lot of horror stories. I think that they are the talented people. I mean, if they are doing PhD, which means you have evaluated their skill sets and you are trying to give them an opportunity to finish the work or collaboration with you on publishing papers. They are helping you to also grow. I think that's the cultural
Yeah,
shock in India. I think that has to.
I've heard stories, but I'm not going to comment because these are something I've heard about. I have not experienced it since
Yeah.
I didn't do my PhD there, but I've heard a lot of stories. Let's be honest, I've heard a
Mm,
lot of stories in the US. A lot of students go to the US to do their PhDs and postdocs and stuff like that. I mean, the
mm.
same thing happens in the US as well. I've heard stories where people, the PhD students, were asked to do their chores for them.
It's
For me, I
everywhere
mean, I
culture.
think that way, I think Europe is much better.
Much
I've never heard such stories coming from European universities that even as a PhD student, the professor is more knowledgeable and has the experience.
better.
But when you speak to them, they consider you as one of their peers. There's equal communication. They don't look down on you, which happens a lot in the US, especially in big universities. I'm sure it happens in India as well because some professors push their weight around. But I guess that way Europe is. I mean, I was working a consortium of lot of groups in doing almost not
Mm.
almost some of them working with vaccines, some of them working with microbicides, some of them working towards immunology, but it's always focused on prevention of HIV. So I've interacted with a lot
Yeah,
of PhD students, a lot of postdocs, and a lot of professors. And the sense I got is that the hierarchy is minimal. It's like they respect your opinion, even if you're a PhD student. You
yeah,
have a certain, yeah, that respect. I mean, people don't really use their position to push you around, which makes life easier, builds your confidence more than anything. Because imagine if you have been,
exactly.
brought up in a system where your professor is always pushing you around. You have to do stuff for them to progress your career. When you go outside, your
Yeah,
confidence is like, dude, you don't know what is coming. You're not confident because all this time you haven't been independent. Suddenly you go to a place
yeah.
where they expect you to watch your opinion, be more independent, proactive. Yeah, that a real shock.
I think that is missing in Indian teaching style. Teachers always keep an eye on
Mhm.
students, making sure they do the right thing. But if you leave them independently, they do the mistake and come back strongly learning.
You support them when needed. You give them freedom as a PI, your experience. When it's not working, you give support, help the
Exactly.
PhD student or whatever it is. You need freedom to think and express their opinions or talents.
So the next is you made another leap, going to Harvard Medical School for a postdoc. And what motivated you to apply there, and the biggest factors in your acceptance?
I didn't choose that. I was really happy to get into that position, but I didn't choose it for the university. Uh, I was working on HIV initially, then I started looking at the microbiome and relationship with the HIV and the microbiome. How I contacted a few people who are working in that field. I mean that specific
Mm,
area, and which included the professor at Harvard. And based on my background in India, lab experience in
mm,
Siena and all that, so based on that, I
mm,
mean, I was called for an interview, and my background met well with what the lab was doing. And yeah, finally, I was offered the postdoctoral position, which I was really happy about. When applying for a postdoc, decide on the area and topic you want to work with. Since I was starting from St. John's, working on a specific area,
mm,
it was easier. I contacted people doing good work in this field. And yeah, this was one of the labs which was producing a lot of publications in this area, and that's how I ended up. I sent a few proposals. Uh,
mm,
I typed in a couple of basic proposals of how I would like to move and what I would like to do, and
mm.
motivation letter. I just looked at it, had an interview. I didn't really work on proposals because, of course, when you
That
go as a
experience.
postdoc or lab, you have to start working on
Yeah,
projects
exactly.
which are already. That's the priority. I got chances to explore as well, and things took
Yeah.
off. I've seen infrastructure in Europe. Boston is a scary place when it comes to infrastructure. There's nowhere in the world when it comes to biomedical sciences and uh, Tufts and all these
Mm.
universities, big names and big pharmaceutical companies built this infrastructure, which is scary.
The application process you followed is sending the resume, brief bio, and asking them to consider your application.
Wrote them an email with a motivation letter, CV, and background. I went one step ahead and wrote a couple of proposals that
Yeah.
maybe pursue this. After finishing a PhD, come up with decent proposals and send it. It adds a lot of value. It means that you can think in the funding and apply for small grants to support the lab. So you can think independently and come up with proposals which could go into research projects.
Were there unique networking or career opportunities in Harvard Medical
Oh
School
yeah.
that help your future plans?
Yes, because I see spin-outs from these labs, which started as small startups, then went on to become raise a lot of funding. The infrastructure there is like compared to nothing in the world.
Yeah.
So, and second thing is when you get into a place like that, if you spin out a startup based on your lab or whatever it
Mm.
is, they already know that you have some sort of weightage because it's a spin out from a Harvard lab. At the end, what I followed, I mean, I wanted to do something better. There are a lot of networking opportunities. There's club dedicated to postdocs, and they hold some good talks and some good networking events where you can go meet other postdocs. They call some really the eminent PIs, and since it's Boston, there are scientific conferences over the year. It becomes
Yeah.
hard for you to attend because you're working a lot. I mean, you're really working a lot. I remember, I mean,
Yeah.
weekends doesn't matter. When you're working on something, you're really working. Trying to make time to attend this meets and events is a challenge, but yeah, when it comes to
Yeah.
networking and all these conferences, the scientific conferences all throughout the year, a lot of networking opportunities. Like I said, there's clubs, and let's say, I mean, you Harvard Med School itself, it's got I think 5 or 6 teaching affiliates, and so many
Yeah.
institutes.
Yeah. Do you think like India will be developing something similar networking or career
Right
opportunities
now,
or research?
I don't see it happening because, for example, when it comes to Copenhagen, they've developed something called as a Medicon Valley.
Mm. Can
Valley is a
Valley.
part. Few hospitals and universities
Yeah.
have come together, like Boston, right? So many universities, hospitals, pharma and biotech companies who are at Boston, Cambridge area, which become a strong network. The same thing happens
Yeah.
in
Exactly.
Oxford, for example. They have so many startups and so many companies set up there. It becomes a valley for innovation. maybe Hyderabad to a certain extent is going in that direction, where they have some sort of which is created for biotechnology, because there are companies which are set up in one area, and there are universities which are
Mm.
catering to that company and stuff like that. Bangalore, they have a biotech park, but I mean, to reach and develop this network, there needs to be
That
proper governance. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, Biocon, puts in a lot of effort to develop the Bangalore biotech scene. The government keeps changing, and every time there's a new minister who comes in with a different idea, and something, the policies keep changing, and their priorities are completely different. Finally, now the central government has allocated funding for research, I mean, decent amount of funding for research. The state level, yeah, nothing.
even students living in the country are looking for better opportunities, education, family, healthcare, comfort, and peace of mind. Those moving abroad for education, any countries, are the talented people. I have seen the report around 85 to 90% students who are living in India, they don't come back to India. It's because of the same issues as you faced, as I faced, as the other people are facing. And building like medical valley or silicon valley, you need talented people with diverse ideas, and then you build it. And as you mentioned, policy makers, they are not well educated and well thought people who are thinking ahead of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They are the same people dynasty politics for decades. They only know how to win elections, leading positions in policy making positions. They don't know what is best for the people or the students, especially who are leaving the country. Even they pay for the students. They want them to
Mhm.
go away. Is there anything in the future people like us can bring some technological advancements in Indian political ecosystem where we can help Indians towards making better decisions to elect the people for the healthcare, education,
Yeah,
and
well,
stuff?
I mean, I don't have a solution. Yeah. All we can do is vote, and that's about it. We have to have educated people who elected and who know the landscape. Like you said, dynasty politics, the ministerial positions are given to people who have no knowledge of the sector. So,
Exactly.
what will they do? I mean, the private people who are accomplished in that area will try and do something to promote, but they can do only the certain go to a certain level. I came back thinking it's better, but honestly, it hasn't
Yeah.
changed at all.
Yeah.
And the second thing is not just going out for education and coming back. If you look at people who pass out of universities in India, which are ranked,
Yeah.
because Indian universities are ranked among the top of the world. They are top, like Indian Institute of Sciences, IITs, and IIMs. People who graduated from there, most of them, you see the Silicon Valley, how many Indians are there? Biotechnology
Exactly.
sector, if you go to the US, for example, and see how many universities, the professors and the doctors and everything, you see the amount of Indians which are there, it's scary. And those people are never going to come
Yeah.
back. In Europe, people like go there. Australia is another option. It doesn't just stop with education. People go outside for education and stay there. Even if you're educated here, even if you get a job, compared to a job you offer from somewhere else, like like the US, Australia, or
Exactly.
UK, and compare it with the other perks and benefits, which is work-life balance,
Exactly.
standard of
Exactly.
living. If you put everything together, a person who's highly qualified will think, if I stay here, I get a minimum salary. The quality of life in some places
Exactly.
are good, most of the places is not up to the mark. Raising kids, for
Exactly.
example,
Exactly.
is a different story. If you put those things together, a highly educated person who has an option to go to one of these places and have a better life,
Yeah.
make more money and live
Well
a
said.
comfortable life, why choose that?
I made a video on the same points you mentioned. You're not happy to leave your country, culture, family, friends, and settle somewhere. It's very hard. Everybody thinks about that, but it's still they want to go because the environment is not supporting
Yeah,
them.
exactly. You don't have an option because outside it's you have better chances of succeeding. Especially when you take up a job, you can reach a certain level in India. After that, it again becomes political.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
from which family background are you? Do you have strong connections to get that promotion? It's not merit based. After some time, you get fed up. Why do all of this? I thought, okay, I'll do something. I'll integrate into the. I'll contribute to the economy. Start my own company, hire some people from the local ecosystem, train
Exactly.
them, use my experience and work.
I think you might have had some issues with
Oh,
bureaucracies, registering a
yeah.
company.
And again, doing in India is impossible. The,
Yeah,
I mean, it's,
possible.
I mean, usually, for example, Denmark, I did it all by myself with some input from somebody else. And these are websites which are there in Danish. I used Google Translate, registered everything online by
Mm,
myself. In India, without a CA,
yeah,
forget it. In a company, you cannot do it by yourself. You need
exactly. To register a company, they'll charge you a lot.
the CA. He's gone through the process. He knows that system, and
Yes.
passing the CA in India is difficult. So CAs,
Yeah.
of course, charge you a lot. Know
Mm.
how to navigate the system. If you could do it yourself, you would do it yourself. In India, you cannot. Without a CA, you cannot register a company.
I registered a company in UK. That took me like 10 minutes to
Exactly.
register. Maximum 7 or 8 questions. All documents shared with you through the email, and it cost me £50. It used to be £12, but they changed in December to 50 now. But in India, it takes
I
58
mean,
days. Do you think with the AI, is it possible to make it easier for everyone to do applications online without involving a lot of bureaucracies?
it's complicated, especially for private limited companies. You can use these tools, but then you have to have the shares allocated. You have to have proper account in some bank, then link it to your company. It's not easy.
Well, let's hope something better. Next, I wanted to discuss with you. So, your experience working in Italy, working in US, and going back to India. How was your welcome?
I didn't care much what people say.
Yeah.
What came to doing something, and it was completely different because you
Mm.
haven't been in the network for a long time. You are like
Yeah.
a stranger. People don't know you. It becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
You apply for incubators, and like we don't know what. Usually, the incubators accept people who are highline, let's say.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes very difficult to get things done. It's
Mm.
at a disadvantage, let's say, when you're outside for a very long time. And then job market, yeah, let's forget about it. It's not happening at all.
Yeah, even from Harvard Medical School, having experience with top-notch people, diverse research and high-level technology, coming back to India.
Start from the beginning. People won't believe you.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
you send your CV is like, some
Fake.
fake profile, fake CV. People won't believe it. Yeah.
Why Harvard man coming to India and
Yeah,
applying for a
I
job?
mean, it's crazy. Yeah. First, they won't believe you. Second thing which you
Yeah.
always get is like, okay, once everything you show your certificates and blah 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 blah, blah, yeah, you're overqualified, which is the normal response rate. Um, so
Qualified.
yeah, I've gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's the bad sign. If a person with that much of experience wants to contribute for our research back in India, want to do something in the startup world, not welcomed really well. And that I think is a triggering point. Look for the opportunities. Was that experience led you to move to
Yeah,
Denmark?
I realized this is impossible. I almost gave up.
Mm,
I invested time, effort, money. I started looking for jobs. Uh, like at least, because
mm,
to get some income and get myself up and running again. But no
mm,
luck there either. Even with the jobs and
mm,
everything, the responses which I got was very terrible. In this case, I have to look at other ecosystem, see where I can
mm,
put my foot. And I looked at a lot of startup opportunities in other countries. UK has a good startup system, but the application has to be supported by one of their approved incubators. Startup
mm,
Denmark is
mm.
different because the Danish Business Authority, you send a proposal for your startup there, and they have a panel. And if you score, they have different criteria to score. Technical, overcome all that they ask you to show enough fund to support yourself for 2 years.
Mm,
Then you can register the company, registered a single man company there, which is company.
mm.
Once you have an entity registered, you can apply for their funding opportunity. I found it much more convenient.
Did you adjust to the Danish culture and language as
Oh, no,
Italian
no. I mean,
culture
it
and
wasn't.
language?
Danish is quite difficult to learn. I mean, it's a very complicated language, and pronunciation is very difficult. And second thing
Yeah.
is culturally, that place is very relaxed. It has a very nice work-life balance, which does apply to you as entrepreneur. You are hustling all the time. You're trying to uh, make connections, go to working events, apply for funding, and pitch
Mm.
in front of investors, pitch in front of funding agencies. So that's a different story. But the thing is that there's some upsides and downsides,
Yeah.
where something
Yeah.
comes all of a sudden and really busy, and there are times there's literally, nothing happening. So you have to get used to that. So
Did you get any fundings for your startup?
that was the angel investor wanted to come in and set up initially. He wasn't willing to put in enough money to get out of the proof of concept round and get into the clinical round. So I had to raise from somewhere else. So things got complicated, and I ran out of financial resources completely. So I couldn't make things work. And let's say at least home, I didn't have to really. I mean, I was taking up some jobs, like I did some freelance work and here and there, mentorship and this and that, and somehow survived. But yeah, let's say Scandinavia in general is very, very, very expensive. So one of the comments you usually get is you have a good technical background, you have solid training and education, but when it comes to the business world, you don't really have experience or training. That is when I decided to pursue a degree in business. As mainly a technical research background, it's always a
Mm.
disadvantage for you to go into entrepreneurship because there'll be a lot of questions, even.
How is your experience going through the MBA after years of research and startup
Yeah, it
experience?
was interesting. There's a science to everything. I mean, everything has, methodology and a scientific way to do. Being from a total biological background, you won't know the tools or techniques you need in business. There you have to look at lots of things which you have different circumstances. There are certain roadmaps, there are certain pathways which you need to take. And with the MBA, you get a technical scientific approach to understanding business and trying to build your business based on indicators and key performance indicators and technical stuff like that. So yeah, so that's where you get a structured way of looking at business and how to develop a business, which I was lacking.
Any standout projects or courses to share?
As a part of the MBA course, it was rigorous because it was a 1 year course. We had projects reports to submit. We had also to do a consultancy project where we actually had to consult startup. I was in a group
Mm.
where it was a medtech startup, AI-based
Oh,
medtech startup, which we were consulting for, which was a good experience because I had some knowledge and background with the stuff that which we learned during the MBA. We could apply all those techniques which we learned, like SWOT analysis, PESTEL, the external, internal fact, what can contribute to developing a business and all that. And then, of course, we had some business trips. We went to different places.
from all your global experience, what do you think India should do to improve healthcare education and technology adaptation?
It is complex because you cannot take the European path. In Europe, healthcare is free. The government takes care of your health, and in India, there's no way that government can afford to do that. In the US, the healthcare system infrastructure is there, but the cost is too high. Don't
Yeah,
have without insurance, you're left. India being still a developing country with most of the population earning not much,
Yeah.
it becomes very difficult because there are private hospitals where middle class and upper middle class and rich people can afford. The government hospitals for me is where India has to really, really, really focus on.
yeah,
It's
yeah. And
pathetic. The infrastructure there and pathetic. You have to improve that. Really have to improve that, and you have to concentrate on that more. Give any sort of proper healthcare. Education system, I wouldn't complain much. The universities in India are ranked top in the world, and Indian education system has already been appreciated because people educated in India are in big positions and all over the place. There is
yeah,
a little bit of improvement to do when it comes to internships and training during your course. That can be done.
I noticed that when I went last time to India, I visited one of my family members in hospital, a newborn baby. You see people
Yeah,
around
it's
just
terrible. It's
see.
terrible.
That's why people who are educated they are moving abroad because you can't raise kids in those environments. Feel unsafe for their kids. Question number two: if you could recommend two or three major policy changes to help entrepreneurs, what would they be?
First, make a proper structure. Funding is limited, but can improve slowly. I'm not saying it can improve overnight because the priorities are. Look at other institutions, for example, the US and European Commission. You cannot put everything under one umbrella of
Yeah.
biotechnology
Yeah.
and then create a biotechnology innovation grant or biotechnology funding in general, get people from all sectors involved, do
Mm,
biotech, make segments, and put people who are expert
yeah,
in those segments and divide the funding, focus on each segment, and
yeah.
make it accessible to everybody, more merit based. Look at the proposals, and if the proposal is good, help them join an incubator, help them join a community instead of choosing people already a part of the accelerator.
What's your biggest piece of advice for anyone looking to follow a path like yours, studying abroad, working internationally, and starting companies in different countries?
There are two paths. The easy path is you go abroad, study, take up a job, a happy life. You know, it's comfortable. You finish after a certain level of education, you get a job, it pays you decent, you have all the amenities in foreign countries. But if you want to achieve something,
Yeah,
face hard obstacles, sacrifice a lot, be ready to be in the dark most of the time, uncertainty of what's going to come next, what's going to happen next. More than anything, you have to be ready.
exactly. A lot of entrepreneurs experience life. They don't look for immediate success, but long-term success with commitment and startups. And so, where can our listeners find you?
LinkedIn is the best place.
Of course. Thank you, Dr. Kevin. I'm Dr. Gnaneshwer. And this is the Accountable Hindustan's podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes on healthcare, education, and innovation. Until next time, thank you.
Best of luck with your new venture.
Thank you.